Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our sixth and final session of the 2021 RPC-MPO joint webinar series. I'm Caitlin Shanahan. I'm one of CARPC's community planners. And today we have with us Tom Barron, who is Wisconsin's EDA representative, Jason Fields, who's the president and CEO of the Madison Region Economic Partnership. And they'll be walking us through current EDA funding opportunities that are available to local governments. So our goal with this webinar series overall has been to provide information, provide resources to support the plans and projects that are going on in the communities in our region. So we hope that they've been useful to you. I think that talking today about how to fund some of these initiatives will be a great way to wrap up the series for the year. A couple housekeeping items. So the webinar is being recorded. We will be emailing out a link to the recording to all registrants tomorrow. And we'll also post it to our website and to our YouTube channel. All participants are muted. You're welcome to put questions or comments in the chat as you think of them, and then we'll answer them live for the group at the end after the presentations. All right, so for this session, as most of you I'm sure know, a large amount of new funding has become available thanks to the American Rescue Plan Act. Very exciting, potentially very helpful to communities, but they are new programs. They're uniquely structured, and there have been some changes along the way. So to help sort through all of this, Tom will start us out by walking through the grants that are currently available, going through the nuts and bolts of all the various programs, and giving some tips to put together a competitive application. MadRep coordinates EDA applications at the regional level, and they facilitate partnerships for EDA funded projects. So Jason will then discuss this work and go over some of the lessons that they've learned by helping applicants through previous application cycles. So with that, I give it to Tom to get us started out.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tom Barron. Thank you for having me today, Caitlin. Thank you for the introduction here. As you mentioned, I'd like to go through some of the funding opportunities that are part of EDA's American Rescue Plan Act, and that I think are probably have most alignment with local governments. From there, yeah, kind of walking through, some things to think about for developing a competitive application. And then kind of wrapping up, I'll be talking a bit about EDA's investment priorities and kind of how that maybe translates into some ideas for projects. So I'm going to turn off my webcam, and then I'm going to share my screen here. Just one second here. Okay, just to confirm, can everybody see a PowerPoint slide that says Economic Development Administration? Okay, I'm seeing a head nodding, so great. Great. So I'm going to move forward on the slide here. So just to start out with a quick refresher about EDA as an organization. It is a federal agency. It's an acronym for the Economic Development Administration. EDA is housed under the U.S. Department of Commerce, and its mission is to lead the federal economic development agenda by promoting innovation and competitiveness, and thus creating regions for growth and success, not only in the domestic economy, but also the international economy as well. We do this primarily by making grants. You'll see on the graphic here is, I think, a good visual of our different grants and kind of the buckets that they fall into. So I'm going to start at the bottom under basic infrastructure. So I would say, for those that are familiar with EDA, I would say this is kind of our legacy, if you will, of doing, say, business parks, or the construction of business incubators, or business accelerators. So we see, as you see in the left call out there, we typically fund transportation infrastructure. So as the creation of new roads for, say, a business park, and then under the utilities, we typically run the sewer and water, take care of the stormwater, and other public infrastructure that's needed to create those conditions where businesses can locate and prosper. The next level is under technology, infrastructure, and business modernization. This is somewhat of a new area for EDA in that we are getting into the broadband space. We currently have 2 active EDA broadband projects in Wisconsin currently. One is up in the Green Bay, Appleton area. New North is doing a gap analysis for broadband throughout its region. So we would consider that a non-construction project. Over in the western and northwestern side of the states, EDA is funding an effort to install fiber in public right-of-way in that a nonprofit broadband utility will be providing services for. So again, we are getting involved in that from both a non-construction effort and a planning effort. Moving up to the next rung, if you will, under business support, EDA routinely is involved in business incubators and accelerators. An additional call out on this one is access to capital. EDA is involved in quite a few revolving loan funds. EDA's typical play in that is the capitalization of the RLF, and then the recipient of that is typically responsible for getting the loans out, managing them, and monitoring them. Next is our innovation engines. This comes down to a couple of different areas. We fund 2 university centers in Wisconsin. Throughout the country, we typically fund 1 to 2 university centers in each state. Currently, UW-Madison or Extension and UW-Platteville are EDA's current university centers. But we also fund what we call our Build to Scale program, where these typically come out about once a year. They're a very time-sensitive funding opportunity that is very very aware of current needs throughout the U.S. and the United States economy, and it's responsive to those. And all these gets us to the top of the graphic here is the main philosophy of EDA is that it's participating in the creation and the maintenance of resilient regions. And so resilient regions in EDA's thinking are better able to respond to disruptions, say such as population loss, job loss, or global pandemics, natural disasters, a variety of things that can be very disruptive and cause significant downtime for economies. So I want to quickly go through EDA's American Rescue Plan grant programs. As I mentioned, I think there's a couple of the funding opportunities that I think are particularly important to today's audience. Overall, though, I'd just like to start out by kind of setting the table, if you will, for what the funding opportunity is. So $3 billion was appropriated to EDA from Congress as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. The intent of this from Congress is to help communities that have been negatively impacted by COVID-19, to help them build back better and stronger, and thus build more resilient regions, and to participate in the recovery from COVID-19. EDA did take that $3 billion and break it down into 6 different funding opportunities that you'll see on the screen now. I said I'm going to get into detail on a couple of them. The remaining ones, I'm not sure are is well aligned with today's audience, but overall, you'll see in the first column there, we have the NOFOs. That is an acronym for Notice of Funding Opportunity. That's basically the description of the funding opportunity as well as the recipe for applying to them. The next column represents the amount of dollars invested to each of the funding opportunities. So you'll see they range quite a bit. Next is a short description of them. And then I would also like to point out, you'll see NOFOs 2 and 4 have the blue shade to them. And if you look at the bottom, that represents a $300 million coal commitment that EDA has made. And I think this is something to certainly think about for your projects. The intent with this is that EDA wants to provide assistance to communities that have been disrupted by coal activities. This isn't certainly limited to, say, a coal mine closing. This could be a coal-fired power plant closing or has made announcements to close. It could be a coal disruption in your supply chain for your local economy. It could be a variety of things. And EDA relies on the applicant to demonstrate that they are a coal commitment because, like I said, EDA has some general parameters and applicants just simply call out how they feel they make that coal connection. So the takeaway here is that of these $3 billion that are allocated to this program or these programs, 300 million of them will be going to coal impacted communities. This is something I certainly bring up during project development calls and usually in preparation for them, looking to see if there's any nearby coal-fired plant closures or anything of that nature. Just a couple other takeaways on this. I think that the two things that stand out as well are, again, with the NOFOs number 2 and number 6, is these are very significant funding opportunities. They are nationwide challenges, where I would say the remaining 4 NOFOs are EDA's normal kind of competitive applications that come through Chicago Regional Office. So now moving into the couple that, like I said, I think are relevant for today's discussion. The first one is the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation funding opportunity. As you'll see here in the italics, the thought here is to accelerate communities that have been impacted by COVID-related travel and tourism declines. So the thought with this is that an applicant is going to be able to demonstrate how their travel and tourism sectors of their economies have been negatively impacted. So let's say their heads and beds counts have gone down, room sales tax collections plummeted, indicators like that. And then from there, an applicant would want to demonstrate how their project is going to help the area recover from those negative impacts and build resiliency to the travel and tourism sectors. So this funding opportunity is broken down into 2 different parts. On the left side, the state of Wisconsin did apply for and receive a $1 million non-competitive grant with EDA. Or I'm sorry, that was not a $1 million, is approximately a $5.5 million non-competitive grant. The state is in the process of accepting the funds for this. I'm not sure if they've had their scope of work completed yet, but this funding opportunity is certainly something communities can reach out to either the Department of Administration or the Department of Tourism to learn more about. I would say a unique thing on the state grant side is that second bullet point there, that destination marketing is an eligible funding activity, but it is not on the competitive side of the grants that I'll be talking about here in a second. So again, the state of Wisconsin is well on its way into accepting that grant program. On the right side is what we call our competitive grant side, or in this case, our challenge. This can, applicants can be local units of government, so towns, villages, cities, counties, regions, you name it, as well as nonprofits. And it can even be, say a parks department within a local government. And again, the intent here is that projects would support the travel and tourism and outdoor rec sectors. I would say, an important distinction about this is that EDA is looking to participate in projects that have that travel and tourism kind of properties built into it, where if an applicant were to come forward and say, hey, we're looking to build a new park or improve a local park because we think it's a good quality of life tool for current residents, certainly important, but generally not in the spirit of attracting travelers and tourists. So I would say generally not going to be as competitive as a project that would come in saying, hey, we want to fund this project because we think we can capture a new tourist market, or we know we can get in a pipeline of, say, traveling baseball tournaments or things of that nature. Moving on to the next funding opportunity, our Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, or EAA, as we call it internally. This really is a flexible program that funds a lot of different activities within EDA. So this can do non-construction projects, construction projects. It can get into, say, that infrastructure for business parks or, implementation of broadband projects. It can fund revolving loan funds. It can also do, if a community is interested in, boy, we need to rethink our economic development plans for our community. This is a program where you could apply for funding to create a new economic development plan for your community, your county. It could also take the approach of, we need to diversify our local economy and therefore need to do a planning effort for that. Or it could be an assessment of, boy, how much land do we have available to develop? So a lot of different planning efforts are eligible under this program, in addition to the wide variety of construction projects. Next, I think this is close enough to impacting local communities to be included in this discussion. This is our Good Jobs Challenge. We've certainly heard that, unemployment rates spiked during COVID. They've largely recovered in most areas, but there is that continued need for finding and recruiting employees to companies. Anywhere you drive around, you see signs, whether they're on semi-trailers or on buildings, with the help wanted. The intent with this program is to think about this from a workforce development perspective, where an applicant would identify a group of folks that need skill or upskilling or some sort of training. And then the applicant would also be working with a group of employers that would be making commitments that, hey, if this set of folks goes through this training and successfully comes out of it, we'll hire them, because then they will come on board to our company with the skills in place to not only have folks to fill the positions, but folks that are ready to go in the types of positions they need filled. So this is a nationwide challenge. This has a hard deadline of January 26th of 2022. I think this is going to be a lot of projects that come out of this, or applications, are going to be very collaborative in nature. As an applicant could be anyone from, say, a tech school to a nonprofit, to pretty much anybody that is justifiably in that space of being able to convene first both a workforce that needs that training and upskilling, and a collection of companies that is interested in gaining employees. I think another very unique thing with this is the use of the term wraparound services in the top description there. One of the things EDA certainly became aware of, and I think everybody became aware of, when people were attempting to come back to work from COVID-19, often childcare was an issue. So the wraparound services can provide funding for something just like that. So, an applicant would make this childcare available and pay for it. That way, a person going through this training could drop the kiddos off at the daycare and then go and receive the training and upskilling. That's just one example of what a wraparound services can be. So that's kind of wrapping up the a real high-level summary of the American Rescue Plan Act. I would say this is a incredibly significant opportunity. Just to put this in perspective, EDA normally operates on an annual budget of approximately $300 to $340 million a year. This is $3 billion coming through EDA. So this gives us a lot of opportunity to fund, say, larger projects and more projects. And with the whole intent of this is to help the country recover from COVID-19. So there's a lot of great things that can be done. I would certainly say funding is available for any of these funding opportunities. I would encourage folks that are interested in it to certainly get the ball rolling on this, because you would want to apply sooner than later to just make sure funding is available. Now I'm going to just transition here into kind of some of the components of competitive applications. Again, this is a very high level. We can certainly have follow-up discussions on this. We can cover some of this during the Q&A portion of this, but we can do a lot of follow-up on it. So eligible applicants to EDA typically fall under one of the categories listed on the screen here. Basically, it's a unit of government, an institution of higher education, so tech schools, colleges and universities, even consortiums of higher education. Nonprofits are also an eligible applicant. And we really don't put a limitation on the classification of nonprofits, so it's not simply just 501c3s, it's a variety of nonprofits. You'll see in parentheses there, we do ask that a local unit of government somewhat vouch for the nonprofit, and usually that's a letter coming from a local community saying, hey, we're aware of this nonprofit, we're supportive of them and their work and this project, and it just helps EDA gain that assurance that you know, everything's kind of on the up and up, if you will, for the nonprofit. So what this eligibility list is also saying is that EDA funding is not available for for-profit entities or for individuals. So I would say certainly this is a fundamental component of an application. You know, I do recognize that there's a need to have a lot of public-private partnerships. There's also, you know, the intent of these projects are typically to help private industry. So there's a lot of ways that we can work through on how we could put together an application that does include private partners. And again, that's where we have what's called the project development process, which involves working with myself and staff from MadRep and at times CARPC to go through that process. Another component of eligibility, a very fundamental one, is eligibility. In normal times, or I should say pre-COVID-19 times, applicants needed to demonstrate that they either had high unemployment based on the metric on the screen or a low per capita income. In addition to that, if they did not have either of those, they could be eligible through the special need, which is the third start bullet point. Say they've had a large employer has shut down in the area. That's created a special need. They've had a FEMA declared disaster come through, say like tornadoes or flooding or things of that nature. That makes them an eligible applicant. That, like I said, is traditional EDA. COVID-19, the last star there, that has made every applicant in the United States that is an eligible applicant, they are now eligible for EDA funding because FEMA did a disaster, COVID-19 disaster declaration for every state in the country. This is great because this opens up EDA funding to those applicants that may not have been traditionally eligible. Another thing that brings forward with this is more competition, though, because where that pool of eligible applicants used to be smaller because it was constrained to the measurements of distress, but like I said, now we have lots of additional folks. So I think it's a good thing, but it's one of those things that brings some additional competition with it. This, I would say, is certainly important for applications, but aren't as, say, fundamental based as being an eligible applicant or the special need or distress. We always certainly want to demonstrate that projects are consistent with a regional strategy. That would be MadRep's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS document. That usually involves an applicant saying, hey, our project aligns or is consistent with MadRep CEDS because it aligns with a set number of goals, objectives, or actions found within the document. I wouldn't say this is a real high bar, but it's certainly something applicants need to include in their application. And in working with MadRep's team, I think that's easily accomplished. The next one, local letters of support. You know, I touched on earlier that nonprofits do need those coming from the local community, but I think it's always good to have some demonstration of letters of support, not canned ones where you get 20 of them that all have the exact same language, but a handful of them that do really identify that, you know, people are aware of the project, they're supportive of them, and they identify how this project, if EDA funded, it would assist them. Matching share. So EDA funds grants at typically a 50 to an 80% grant rate. So an applicant needs to provide that remaining portion of the project. So anywhere from 50 down to 20%. You want to make sure that you can document at time of application that you have that local match, it's available. That, you know, as the second star there indicates, there's really no strings attached to it. It's committed to the project. It's available. There's no encumbrances on it that would prevent its use. You're also going to want to identify, what the source of funds is. We do have some limitations on other federal dollars being used as a local match. Generally, that's not allowed unless it's a community development block grant. But again, that's something we can certainly talk through on a case-by-case basis. And the last bullet point here, on construction project, EDA does require that local match is cash or money of some sort versus an in-kind. Non-construction projects can be a mix of in-kind and cash. This slide is more to point out some pitfalls in applications, some things that really chip away at a competitiveness of a project. Just to hone in on a couple of them, the site where the construction activities are taking place needs to be owned by an eligible applicant. We call it site control, but if say a private entity owns the property where the project will be taking place, it's going to make it the competitiveness suffer greatly from it. So typically projects are going to be owned by that nonprofit, that local unit of government, things of that nature. That doesn't preclude, say, like in a business park case, that you would sell off, parcels in the future to businesses, but at time of application, it does need to be owned by an eligible applicant. Just one or two other things here. Eminent domain, EDA cannot participate in projects where land was acquired through eminent domain. The preliminary engineering report is getting kind of very detailed for this type of discussion, but at times applicants include an engineering report that is very unclear and tough for EDA to understand what the project is and what it is not. Under non-construction issues or non-construction projects, some of the issues we see that, one, because we're a federal agency, we have to use federal procurement. That involves a competitive procurement of consultants or contracts that you just can't sole source everything that you would purchase with EDA dollars. We need to make sure that one of the last bullet points there is that we're avoiding a pass-through of funds to a private entity. And these are just some other challenges, again, that I can speak to during project development calls. Kind of wrapping up here, economic justification, I think, is another key portion of it. You need to establish and have EDA concisely understand, what's the reason for doing this? How is it going to help this area or this region become more diverse, more resilient, or more prosperous? Projects that can't succinctly demonstrate that, it's tough for EDA to get on board with. You kind of think of from EDA's review committees that look at these applications. How are they supposed to fulfill EDA's missions and move forward on projects that don't exhibit a good economic justification? Again, my role in all this is to help you develop that, but certainly projects need to have that inherently built into them. I'm going to wrap up there because, again, a lot of this really does come down to a case-by-case basis. And I'm just going to wrap up this portion of the presentation with what does make a competitive application. As EDA always sees more applications than it has funding available. As such, it does, it has to make tough choices, and only the most competitive applications move forward. So competitive applications do show that confirmed match, that it's available. the applicant has demonstrated some sort of economic distress, whether that's COVID-19 or unemployment or, per capita income issues or job losses. There's something there that has hurt the local economy. The return on investment, I would say, is the piece of that economic justification. How is it going to improve conditions for the area? And you'll see the other bullet points there, I think just make good sense on projects, that there's partners that are part of this, that it is a defined project. It has a good geographic distribution for the project. Now, as I wrap up my portion of the talk here, I want to talk about EDA's investment priorities. And to do that, I'm actually going to go. Can everybody see this? You should be seeing a website now. Okay, I've seen some nodding of heads again. So one of the many criteria EDA uses to make investments or grants to projects are these 7 investment priorities. So equity, recovery and resilience, workforce development, manufacturing, technology-based economic development, environmentally sustainable development, and exports and FDI. So a couple of things here. One, every application that comes into EDA is going to want to show alignment with at least one of these 7 investment priorities, and it's going to ask for it in the application materials. For American Rescue Plan applications, you're certainly going to want to be able to demonstrate number 2, recovery and resilience. But I would generally say the more legitimate connections you can make to other investment priorities, generally speaking, the more competitive the application could be. So that's speaking from a kind of an application and a strategy development side. The other way I look at this is this kind of displays the types of projects that EDA can participate in. First and foremost, there's always got to be that economic justification for doing it. But outside of that, like let's say if we look at number 6, economically sustainable development. And you see here, including green infrastructure. If a project comes forward that has a good economic justification for it, and it is also proposing to use green infrastructure, that gives it alignment with this and could potentially make the project more competitive. Now, if a project was coming forward and saying, hey, we want to install this green infrastructure only because we think it's good for the environment, that's great, but it's missing that economic justification component. The same thing with any other of these, whether that's equity, the technology-based economic development, it should always start with that economic justification, and then it certainly is free to, and encouraged to include these other investment priorities. The technology-based economic development, I've heard a lot in the area here about the need to have some business incubators, and it sounds like very high tech or scientific based incubators. This, generally speaking, is supportive of that and is looking for applications that include technology based economic development. So like I said, I think the big takeaway here is one, you want to show that your project has alignment with it, and 2, this is in a way telling you, types of projects that you could come forward to EDA with. So I just talked a lot there. I threw a lot at you. I need to get a drink of water here. And I know I keep saying I'm going to wrap it up here, but I forgot I had one more slide here. A couple of things to think about for more information on this. EDA.gov has a great amount of information about the funding opportunities, including the actual NOFO. As far as point 2, the Economic Development District, this is CARPC and MadRep here have this great partnership going where they're a great part of the team to have in the area. And then there's me for number 3. I am the Economic Development Representative that covers Wisconsin. You'll see Wisconsin falls within the Chicago Regional Office. There's my contact information. I'm gonna, I think you'll have access to this as well. I can throw it in the chat box as well. So at this point, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Jason.
Hey, Caitlin, should I go in?
Yes.
Thank you.
The floor.
All right, I'll be very quickly, very quick, because I want to make sure you have enough time to touch base with Tom. And thank you for my team. And Tom, thank you for being a part of this. And CARPC, we're all one big happy family. And so I want to give you all just a couple of items that Tom expressed. And I think from our experience, and this is coming from the lens of MadRep and CARPC, we've been awarded grants, we've not been awarded grants. So just to reiterate and touch on some things that we think are vitally important. Number one, match the project with the right NOFO, right? I think that's one of the things where we've seen a lot of people, when they're writing these things, they think you're writing from your own point of view. You have to, you forget that there are people looking at this. And so match the project with the right NOFO, with the right department. Case in point, we see a lot of things USDA or the EDA have some of the programs, but what we'll see is grants and projects that are written that should be applied for tourism. And so, make sure you're matching the project with the right NOFO. Number two, the collaborations. The collaborations, I believe, are very key, and for a number of reasons. Based on just your population, your demographics, you really do need to make sure that you're working with a number of partners to cover as much ground as possible when you're applying and going for these grants. Number three, and this is a personal one for us at MadRep, it really has to be an innovative project. It really has to be different. And I would say when you're going for these, innovation in something different is subjective sometimes, but I want you all to think from the lens of you're applying to EDA and they see a number of projects year over year. And so what makes this project innovative or different? And part of that, I believe, can help with a number of us is if your project has been turned down before, odds are maybe it's not as innovative as you may think. Not to say that it's not innovative, but again, you have a number of people looking at this. Don't write these things as if you're writing for yourself, because you're not. Number four, a realistic dollar amount. I think we've had success. We haven't had success. Make sure there's a realistic dollar amount that can match the project. I would say don't get greedy. Number five, again, and this is take a look at what kind of projects have been awarded. Tom gave us a number of things that we could look at, a number of resources. You see them come out, take a look at what kind of projects have been awarded and sort of determine where does your project line up with those types of projects. Because again, the last thing you want to do is to submit something that's been rejected before. And so save yourself some time. Number six, and I can't stress this enough, they have to be tied into a COVID. How has COVID impacted your project that you're writing for, that you're submitting? Number seven, again, when we're at MadRep, we discuss matches with everything that we do. We're always looking for a match, some kind of match. And if I'm correct, Tom said 50 to 80. So you should be looking anywhere from at minimum of 20 to 50% match. Finally, the economic justification. I think Tom showed us those numbers. You have to make a great case for the economic adjustment. I'll tell you where I think a lot of people miss it, and it has more to do with, we believe when you're writing these things, you're writing it from your point of view. That's fine, but you have to remember you're writing this to gain interest from a number of reviewers and people who will be looking at this. So just because you may think something is innovative doesn't necessarily mean it's innovative. And so I want to make sure you all you touch on those points so that, one, you save time and you produce a project that has a high chance of success in getting funded. And so just real quickly again, and I'll wrap up, match the project with the right NOFO. Collaborative regional efforts. We all struggle in some of those areas as far as demographics targets. Make sure you're partnering with people who have strengths that you don't. Number three, make sure it's truly different and innovative. 4, realistic dollar amount. Number 5, don't submit projects that have been rejected already. Number 6, make sure you tie in how COVID has impacted your potential project. Number 7, the match. Always look, if you can, to garner some sort of match, at least 20%. And then number 8, and the final point is make sure the economic justification is strong in your application or what you submit. With that, Caitlin, I'll be quiet, and hopefully the viewers have some questions for Tom.
Fabulous. That was really excellent information. Thank you to both of you. Our first question that we have in the chat is, I think, directed toward Tom. Does the coal communities funding aim to help communities transition away from coal as an energy source?
You know, I think that's an indirect effect to it. I think the direct intent of it is to help communities because they're experiencing a disruption from the change of a coal-fired plant or whatever that coal-related activity is, that there's been a negative impact because of this. And as such, some assistance is certainly appropriate to help the area recover from that negative impact and build resiliency. Now, getting back to the green infrastructure, you know, now if something could replace coal-fired or, you know, a coal as an energy source, I think that's something, you know, EDA would look at for a project. I don't know how realistic or competitive it would be to say have EDA fund you know, a 40-acre solar array or something like that. You know, we're really not in the energy sector, if you will. But again, just going back to the economic justification for it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So to follow on to that, Tom, could some of the plan money or other economic adjustment money be used to help a community to do an assessment and develop primary and secondary plans for when a coal plant leaves their community?
Absolutely. You know, learning from this, and this also applies to nuclear power generation as well, which I don't think has a presence in the area, but these types of jobs in this sector, I mean, the incomes are incredible. So when a coal-fired power plant closes, there's a lot of great jobs that are lost in the community as well, in a lot of wages that are lost. So yeah, it is certainly appropriate to either, if you are, say, reacting to it, the event has already happened, or if you're looking to be proactive because you know something's going to happen. Yeah, either way is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Tom, can you answer or expand on, and I think we've asked this before, when we talk about regional collaboration, does it mean within the state, without it, across border lines? Is it just in that city? What does collaboration with multiple parties mean? What can you get away with?
Yeah, it's a great question. It can be any of what you suggested. I think, you know, one thing to think about, EDA really puts a lot of emphasis on applicants coming to EDA talking about what their needs are. In addition, talking about what their capacities are. EDA is in no way coming into a community or telling an applicant what you need to do or how you need to do it. It's got to fall within the lanes that EDA sets out. But collaboration could be, if it's a pinpoint on the map where the project's taking place, it could be a variety of local partners engaging. That's collaboration. Some projects involve, you know, a county or a couple of counties. You know, I'll reference the New North project, where it's New North's entire 18-county region. That has a lot of collaboration across a pretty good chunk of the state, actually. It can expand statewide. It can even extend, you know, across state boundaries as well. It's really what is appropriate for the applicant and what makes sense.
Excellent. Would you be able to comment on how to structure a public-private partnership when the real estate is privately owned?
Yeah, you know, generally speaking, that's going to be challenging. So the first reaction to that is going to be is there a different place where it could be owned by an eligible applicant? If that's simply not the case, if that's the, it's got to be here. A couple of other ways to think about EDA being involved are, could EDA assist in a feasibility study or a planning effort for the project in general? Because at the end of the day, EDA generally isn't, if it's privately held and there's no way around that, EDA's project can't really go in that footprint of that facility or that land. But like I said, we can do planning efforts for the area. We could also look at projects that involve getting infrastructure to the area of the community where the project would be located in. We would be looking for multiple business interests to benefit from it. But those are kind of different ways to, I would say, maybe more indirectly look at a project that involves a ineligible land ownership. But there certainly are different ways we can look at it. And again, to put in another pitch for the project development calls that you can have with myself and MadRep, that's where those calls come in, and we can really spend some time diving into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll give kind of a last call if anyone else wants to enter a question into the chat. Give a minute for that. Otherwise, I could open to either of the presenters if you have any closing thoughts to add to your presentations.
Yeah, I can. Oh, Jason, did you want to go ahead? Or
I'll just say thank you, Tom. If you all have questions, Tom is just a part of the family. He's been a great resource. We love picking his brain. He's been very helpful. And so I would say if you're really serious about this and you really do want to, go to the next level, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, call us, and use him as a resource. As you can see, the information is pertinent and at this point in time, invaluable.
I just like to add a couple things. Jason's nailed it here, so I think he can handle the future calls with those 8 points that he had. So, I can, he can take it from here. Boy, those were really on point. So I appreciate that, Jason. Like I said, really, really relevant, very accurate. And you can tell he's been on a number of these calls and a part of these discussions with that. But on a serious note, please understand that again, what we call the project development phase that we go through, this typically starts out with, hey, we sat in on this webinar, we got an idea or two for a project, we're interested in having a conversation to see if there's, what we think there is for potential for an application. So it typically starts out with an email or a call like that, where we do set up some sort of virtual meeting or conference call to talk through it. And then from there, that goes all the way through to, like, say if an applicant starts to work on an application, they typically have questions through that process. They're reaching back out to me to get assistance with that. And then per EDA, the process works best if I'm reviewing your final application materials before you hit that submit button on the application. We found it just develops a lot more competitive applications, and that's the point of all this is submitting things that can get funded, right? The other thing I'd add is, there's a lot of funding available right now that has good intentions on helping our communities and regions recover. If you are interested on it, I would just recommend don't wait, because if you're giving me a call, say in March, I might have to say, hey, unfortunately, the funding's not available. This is always call and ask and make sure, but please do call as soon as you're ready to talk about things. There's no commitment in it. It's just working a process, and the sooner the better from that standpoint.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. On behalf of CARPC and the MPO, we really appreciate you being here to share your expertise. We thank all of our participants for being here with us today. And once again, the recording will be shared via email with everyone who's registered. We'll also post to our website and our YouTube channel where you can find recordings of all our past webinars as well. We are tentatively planning another session on ARPA funding for early next year in partnership with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. So we'll be announcing that via email and through our newsletter and Facebook page. Stay tuned for more information. With that, thank you again and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.